I noticed the door on my third week out at sea somewhere off the Norwegian coast 200 meters below the surface. It was small, steel, and tucked away behind rows of pressure-regulated piping near the aft compartment, where few of us had any reason to linger unless maintenance was required. The odd part wasn't just that it was locked, it was that I had never seen it before, and I knew this boat. You memorize your surroundings on a submarine. The tight corridors, recycled air, constant low hum of the reactor. You know when something's even slightly out of place. And that door was new, or it had been hidden. We were deep in patrol, classified missions, minimal comms with the outside world, standard for this kind of deployment. Officially, we were tracking strange seismic activity, but unofficially, a few of us suspected it had more to do with the Russian sub that had gone dark 6 months ago. Still, between shifts, I kept thinking about that door. I stared at it during smoke breaks and checked it every time I passed near the compartment. No label, no hinges on the outside, just a small rectangular panel beside the knob, unlit and cold to the touch, like it wasn't even connected. I finally asked Chief Lewis about it. He just gave me a weird look and said, "Forget about it. Must be some old maintenance alcove they never logged." But here's the thing. We log everything on a sub. There are no unaccounted for spaces. Square footage matters. Weight distribution matters. And I knew damn well that door wasn't on the original schematics. I'd checked. The first night I decided to really investigate was the same night Hendricks started acting different. He was always the class clown, annoying but harmless. But that night he sat alone in the galley, silent, staring straight ahead with bloodshot eyes, muttering something under his breath. I asked if he was all right. He didn't respond, just slowly turned toward me with this 1,000-yard stare like I wasn't real. Then he got up and wandered off without saying a word. Later I passed him near the aft stairwell. He was whispering to the locked door. No joke, he was standing right in front of it, gently pressing his palm to the metal like he was comforting a sick child, whispering things I couldn't hear. When I called out, he jerked back like he'd been caught doing something dirty. Then he just walked away like nothing happened. That night I had dreams. Deep water. Endless black, something knocking from the outside of the hull, a sound too rhythmic to be random, a kind of code. Tap, tap, pause, tap. When I woke up, I could still hear it echoing softly through the walls. 2 days later, Hendricks went missing. Disappeared during the third watch. The logbook showed he was assigned systems check in the aft section. That was the last place he was seen. Sabu called a full sweep. We tore the whole ship apart front to back. Nothing, no sign of him. Not even a uniform. The official statement said Hendricks had fallen overboard during a routine surface procedure. We hadn't surfaced in 3 days. After that, I kept going back to the door. I started knocking on it late at night, just softly. Once, after the second knock, I swear I heard a faint knock back. Pressure does weird things to your head. Long shifts, no sunlight, stale recycled air. You start to imagine things. But I'd been on patrols for over 5 years. I'd never felt paranoia like this. I finally brought it up to Ruiz, engineer, compartment lead, and one of the sharpest people on board. She looked at me for a long second and said quietly, "It's SEP's not on the internal map." She pulled out her diagnostic tablet, showed me the internal blueprint overlay. Right there on screen was a blank spot where that door should have been. Pipework sketched right across the wall, no break in the line. It was like the door physically couldn't exist. We checked heat signatures next, just a curious peek. Behind every bulkhead, the thermal sensors showed standard temperature differentials, except one, right where that door was. Cold. Not normal sub-cold, but unnaturally cold, like dry ice or something deeper. Ruiz stopped coming near the area after that. Started keeping to the 4 compartments, even slept in the mess when she wasn't on shift. I did the opposite. I couldn't let it go. Something was behind that door, and it was letting people in. 3 days after Hendricks vanished, another crew member disappeared. Davies. Same story. On duty near the aft auxiliary hatch. Just gone. We passed the full alert again. Searched every compartment, reviewed every log. No security footage. Our internal cameras had all looped for a 17-minute window. Whole ship went blind. No one could explain it. When I pointed out that both disappearances happened within 30 feet of the locked door, the CO pulled me aside. He said, "You will not talk about that door again." Am I clear? Clear. He looked terrified. Not pissed, terrified. Like he knew and didn't want to know more. Like someone higher up had warned him already. That night I waited until the lights went out, brought a wrench, crowbar, even swiped a maintenance keycard to try and override the panel. Nothing worked. Not even a scratch on the steel. No sound within. No vibration. It was like the door wasn't part of the sub at all. Except for once, when I knocked again, and it knocked back. 3 times. Fast. Sharp. I stumbled back. Nearly dropped the wrench. That was real. That was not in my head. I didn't sleep. Neither did Ruiz. We stopped talking, but every time I looked across the mess I saw the same panic in her expression. Other crew started keeping to themselves more too. Morale plummeted. I think some of them felt it even if they didn't know what it was. Like the pressure behind the walls. A sound you can't hear but you know is there. Then came the emergency dive. Severe pressure surge. Alarms went off, everyone rushed to stations. That part was real. The ocean doesn't play nice when you reach the wrong depth. But when we leveled off, barely stabilized, I noticed something on the system logs. We'd descended exactly 39 meters too far. Precisely, like it had been planned. And after that drop, the cold spot behind the door was gone. It was warm now, active. Something inside had activated. No more knocks, now it was breathing. Have you ever heard a sound that isn't made by anything alive but still feels organic? Like a massive lung inhaling from behind steel plates. Walls compressing, flexing with each slow exhale. We all felt it. The whole sub grew heavy, like we were no longer underwater, but inside something ancient that had woken up. Ruiz cornered me before shift one night. She said the door had opened. Just a crack, enough to see darkness. Pure black, not shadowed, void. She said she saw Hendricks' boots just beyond the crack, and a hand that wasn't his. I rushed back to see it myself. When I got there, the door was shut tight. The panel, lit for the first time, glowing dim green, waiting. I didn't knock. I didn't even breathe near it. That was 3 weeks ago. We're headed home now. Final days of patrol. Ruiz is gone. Last seen near the aft again. CO said she must have slipped during low-gravity stabilization. Another accident. Another wiped camera. There's only 24 of us left. The captain doesn't come out of his cabin anymore. He hasn't addressed the crew in 5 days. Food tastes metallic. The lights are always dimmer in the back compartments, even after maintenance runs. And the worst part, the door is still there, still locked, but it's not cold anymore. Now it pulses. I swear to God I hear it calling me. Not in words exactly. More like recognition. It knows me. We're 3 days from the port. I can't sleep. I keep dreaming that the sub never surfaces. That instead we keep descending deeper and deeper. And only I remember we were ever supposed to leave. If this is my last log, just know I tried. I tried to warn them. But the door isn't on any blueprint because it was never built. It was invited. I knew something was wrong the second the sonar tech went pale. Thomas is the kind of guy who laughs in the middle of fire drills and makes jokes while the ballast groans under pressure, but as soon as that ping came through, his face dropped like someone had reached through the bulkhead and snapped his spine. Dead quiet. Then he looked over his shoulder at me and whispered, "It's our call sign." I thought he was screwing with me. Everyone here cracks under the pressure eventually. You try holding your shit together in a sealed metal coffin hundreds of meters under the ocean, running on 20-year-old nuclear power, stale air, and reheated food. But when I walked over and looked at the screen, I couldn't breathe. The code coming through the sonar, it was ours. Not our squadron. Not a nearby ship. Our submarine. The USS Ensign. We sank last week. At least we should have. Memories weird after trauma. I remember the alarms shrieking first, then the lights cutting out, then the power surging back just long enough for a hydraulic line to burst. That high-pitched screech metal makes when it's stressed to the breaking point. I still hear that when I sleep. We were slipping past thermal layers off the Greenland shelf when we hit something. Not a collision. Exactly. More like the ocean itself twisted around us. Then nothing. I remember holding on to my bunk and thinking, this is how it ends. We were taking on water. Lights were flashing red. The emergency ballast protocol failed. Then someone screamed that the turbines were spiraling. It all just stopped, like a TV turned off mid-episode. Next thing I know, I am waking up in sickbay, groggy. No injuries, no water in the boat, just whispers between crew who kept their heads down. When I asked, the CO told me we encountered a malfunction during testing drills. Routine, under control, focus on the mission. But during mess hours, no one's laughing anymore. People walk slower, quiet conversations die the moment you step into the room, and no one mentions last week, as if it got stripped from our records and memories like it was nothing more than bad weather. So when I saw that signal come through, our beacon identifier broadcast from below, I knew I wasn't crazy. We went down last week, we had sunk. Somehow we surfaced again, but maybe not all of us. The most disturbing part wasn't the signal, it was that it kept pulsing every 7 seconds. The exact rhythm of our emergency beacon. Only someone on board the Ensign would know that sequence, and the signal origin. It was coming from 114 meters directly below us. We were in open water when we picked it up. No wrecks nearby, just frigid black beneath us for miles. The chart said there was a trench shelf underneath, a steep drop where another sub could maybe get wedged and go invisible to basic sonar sweeps. But this signal wasn't random noise. It wasn't distorted or old. It was fresh, like it had just been turned on. Thomas refused to say anything else, said he'd already reported it to the captain, so said it was a sonar ghost. Refraction from something bouncing off underwater ice. Ignore it and move on. But I could see it in his eyes. He knew what it was. He just couldn't say it out loud. 2 of our crew had disappeared since the day we came back. First was Harrow, a machinist. Nice guy, beard always a little too long, talked about his daughter constantly. He missed the mess one night, then his watch. The search came up empty. The next day he was officially transferred to a stateside facility for evaluation. No medevac, no explanation, just gone. Second was Monroe, one of the sonar team. I found her standing in the hallway at 0300, staring at the wall next to the comms panel. She said, "They're beneath us," and walked straight into the engine room. Never seen again. Her bed was made the next day like she'd never existed. The crew doesn't talk about them, but I still have Monroe's notebook. Found it under her bunk when no one was looking. Pages of sonar logs, hand-drawn, and one note, circled multiple times in red ink at the bottom of a page. The Ensign can be in 2 places at once. Except maybe it can. We ran another sonar sweep 3 nights ago. Thomas was off shift and the new guy, Patel, didn't know how to cover it up properly. So I watched the sweep myself. There were 2 signals now. Both are identical. Both transmitting the Ensign SITS ID. One directly below us. The other behind us. We'd started moving by then. Orders were to change, heading toward a rechart point. But speed had dropped without explanation. Maintenance said something about resistance. But sonar showed nothing around. nothing near. And yet, we were slowing down. And behind us, the second signal was following, keeping pace, echoing our ID with a 2-minute delay, like it was repeating us. When I told the CO, he looked tired, older than I'd ever seen him. He didn't set blink, didn't set to ask questions, just told me to fall in line. That SIP's the thing they don't tell you about life on a sub. It depends entirely on orders. If the command says trees grow under the ocean, then they do. You either go along with it or you set rail labeled a risk, either quietly sent home or dealt with more immediately. I spent the next 2 days trying to get into the restricted logs. They keep a black box even for subs, ping data, movement history, depth records. You just need the right clearance chain. Thomas helped. He shouldn't have, but I guess he was just as scared. The logs showed something horrifying. Our depth did max out last week. Too far. Below crush depth. We should have imploded. The hull shouldn't have withstood it. But in the timeline, there's a gap. 11 hours and 42 minutes of null data. The record just goes blank. Then reboots with a system timestamp, same coordinates. Just reinitialized, like a fresh boot up. Almost like we weren't booting up our sub, but something that replaced it. After that, I paid attention to the crew more closely. They said changing. They all follow their routines. They eat and sleep on schedule, but some of them, their eyes, they stare too long. Their responses are off. They'll answer before you ask a question. Laugh half a second after the joke. And I noticed bruises on Coleman Sip's arms. Big ones, like someone with massive hands grabbed him, but we hadn't made contact with anything. He told me quietly, like he was afraid it would follow him. Don set to answer if it knocks. If what knocks? He wouldn't say. The night before last, the backup sonar screen started flashing again. Private feed, external, unapproved ping. I watched the waveform carefully. It was sending Morse, just 3 letters. Key. Jose. Do. I asked Thomas what COD even meant. He went pale again. Cause of death. Last night I woke up to the sound of wrenching metal. Not like failure, but like something was opening. The door to compartment B29, the one sealed since the malfunction, was now unlocked. Inside was darkness. No lights, no humming from the wiring, just deep cold like the bottom of the world had clawed its way in. And on the floor, a boot, regulation navy, torn at the ankle, tag still attached. It's horror. We're approaching the rendezvous point tomorrow. Command thinks we're bringing valuable environmental data, nothing about missing crew, sonar ghosts, or the sub following behind. But tonight it's not pinging us from behind anymore. It's directly above us. An impossible signal from directly overhead. There sits nothing above us. No boats, no airships, no nothing. Just water. Which means it sits not following us anymore. It may have switched places. Morse came again just 5 minutes ago. Loose feed, same letters. Sir, O falls. Decis, but this time one more. They know. They know something walked out of the sunken version of this submarine and into our place. And its set's not done yet. Something hit the hull just now. A knock. 4 slow, deliberate raps near the forward chamber. I'm the only one who heard it. Which means it sets for me. I don't think we ever made it back. I think we died last week. And whatever answered back from the bottom of that trench, it's still coming up. It started about 3 days into the dive. We were off the coast of Iceland, running quiet, classified depth, no surface contact, tense but routine, until the first knock. I was in my berth trying to sleep when I felt it, not heard, felt. A low, heavy thud that echoed through the metal like it came from inside my own chest. You get used to the constant hum of the sub, the creak of the hull, the distant shift in ballast. But this was different. Intentional, solid, deliberate. 4 knocks. Slow, then nothing. I sat up, heart pounding. Thought maybe I dreamed it. But the guy in the bunk opposite Jenkins was awake too. He just looked at me and said, "You heard that, right? We didn't tell anyone. You don't bring up stuff like that in the Navy, not unless you want to end up in the psych bay or ship topside for evaluation." So we kept our mouths shut and figured it was some kind of water pressure anomaly. The cold plays tricks on sonar, makes sounds bounce in weird ways. But the next night, it happened again. And again, exactly at 0200 hours. 4 knocks. Like someone tapping a door waiting to be let in. The weird thing was they echoed from the outside. That's impossible at 900 feet. You're not supposed to hear the outside at that depth. Nothing survives down there, not without getting torn apart or crushed. Sound gets swallowed by pressure and silence. But there it was, right against the hull. Like someone was drifting in the dark just outside the ship, using a gloved hand to announce themselves. That time the noise carried through the entire lower corridor. 5 other guys heard it. Everyone just stared at each other, frozen in the narrow hallway, pretending we didn't hear the thing we definitely heard. Someone muttered that maybe it was thermal expansion, stress response, usual excuses. That night in the mess, conversation was strained. Something had shifted. A couple guys were clearly shaken. Jenkins wouldn't leave the forward crew quarters at all, just hunched over in his bunk muttering to himself. He stopped shaving. Stopped responding when anyone asked if he was okay. At 0200 the next night the knocking returned. But this time, it moved. It traveled along the hull. You could track it by sound. 4 slow knocks, a pause, then 4 more a few meters down. Like someone crawling and tapping, all the way down the outside of the ship. I was awake for all of it, laying petrified in my rack. And at one point I swear it stopped right behind my head where the outer hull is just 2 inches of steel from the back wall. I held my breath, didn't move. It was like something could smell me through the wall. It stayed there for 13 minutes. Then it moved on. The next morning Jenkins was gone. Vanished from his bunk, sheet folded, pillow dented like he'd just stepped away for breakfast. No cameras saw him leave. They checked every compartment. Nothing. Logged as a disappearance. Likely suicide from stress, they wrote. But no one mentioned how the outer airlock had unsealed itself for 6 seconds that same night. 6 seconds. That shouldn't even be possible without override and triple confirmation. When I brought it up to the XO, he told me firmly there was no seal breach. Get some rest. From that moment on, the knocking didn't stop. Every night exactly 0200 like clockwork. But now it came from different directions at once. Sometimes forward bulkhead, sometimes port side. Once from beneath us. Once from directly above, which should have been impossible considering the tower sat there. And each time it came with that same deliberate rhythm. 3 or 4 knocks. Sometimes 5. Never more than 5. Then silence. Last night the sonar tech, Marek, came to my bunk. He looked pale, sleep-deprived, like he hadn't eaten in days. He said he'd been muting something from the commander. Something showing consistently on the sonar like a small object moving in tandem with our ship. Except by size and positioning it looked almost like... He didn't say it. He just showed me the scan. An object roughly human-sized, no propulsion, no oxygen output, no light. Follow us. Hovering just outside the hull, always at 900 feet. And Marek had tracked something else. The object only moved when we did. Stopped when we stopped. Turned when we turned. And it never drifted. Like it wasn't floating, but clinging. Last night it got worse. I woke up to screaming from the lower deck. McCarthy, one of the newer guys, sprinted into the central corridor, bleeding from his face. His hands were torn open like he'd been punching steel. He kept saying over and over, "It looked like Jenkins. It looked like Jenkins." They sedated him and hauled him to the med bay. I stole a look at the hallway where he'd come from. There were handprints. On the outside of the viewport, smears. Like someone was trying to claw their way in, but from space where no one should be. From pressure that shreds human meat to pulp. And they were fresh. Scars of condensation still slid where fingers had smeared across them. The captain called a secure all hands. Addressed everyone, said we were changing heading due to seismic readings. No one believed him. We all just sat there silent, waiting, listening. The steel felt thinner after that. Fragile. I didn't sleep. Around 0210 the sub shut down. Just all at once. Lights, reactor hum, everything went black. Emergency lights kicked on, red and low, and then water alarms started howling. We weren't flooding, but we were descending. No propulsion. Ballast ignored commands. We were falling, slow but steady, deeper than 900 feet. No one said a word, we all knew. Then came the knocking. Everywhere. Rapid, desperate. From every side, like we were in a steel drum filled with bodies, fists pounding all at once. But we were too far down. Nothing alive could survive outside. Then I heard a scream from the engine room. Not mechanical. Not the crew. Something high pitch. Animalistic but clearer. Human-shaped. I ran. I should have stayed put. I should have waited for the emergency protocols. But I had to know. When I got there, one of the valves was open. Steam hissed into the air, and hanging from the ceiling was Jenkins' dog tag. Clean, like it had just been issued. And inside the condensation on the pressure pipe, someone had written letters with their finger. I'm still here. The temperature dropped suddenly, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Emergency lights buzzed low and flickered. Behind me, in the corridor, I heard something dragging. Long, slow, like someone scraping their nails across metal. Not footsteps. Not boots. Flesh. Wet. Slapping gently as it moved. I didn't look. I just backed away. Eventually I made it to the forward station. Most of the crew was huddled in silence. The knocking had stopped. But no one was speaking. Just breathing together, shallow and afraid. Looking around the room, I realized there were too many of us. Only by one or two. Subtle. But I do night watch. I remember faces, and in the red glow of the backup lights I saw someone staring back at me. Wearing McCarthy Sit's face. But his eyes were different. Empty. Black-ringed. Like they were looking through all of us, not at us. He smiled. The lights came back then. Just like that, systems back online. We stopped descending. Everything powered up like nothing had happened. Command says there was a software glitch. They started prepping us to surface now. But some of the crew, their behavior's off. Tiny things. Wrong gait. Wrong voice tone. One guy brushed past me and was cold to the touch. None of them say they heard the knocking. But I still do. In my head, every night. 4 knocks. Getting closer. We are surfacing tomorrow. But whatever was outside, it's not outside anymore. It got in. We were already too deep when he showed up. That's the part that eats at me the most. When you're out on a fast attack sub like USS Silvershade, you keep a tight head count. Every face, every shift partner, every bunk locked down from day 0. Even if you don't know everyone personally, you remember who's supposed to be there. There's 0 room for error when you're sealed inside a 6,000-ton coffin 1,200 feet underwater with no sunrise for weeks. So when I saw the new guy in the mess, a pale, quiet guy sitting by himself cleaning under his nails with the tip of a fork, I figured he was a tech I'd somehow missed during prep. No handshake. No what's your rate. Just him staring at the wall like he was waiting for something. At first, no one said anything. That's not unusual. Sometimes we get last-minute personnel swaps. Civilian sonar analysts, contractors, even spooks from naval intel. You learn not to ask too many questions unless you really want to be reassigned to mopping bulkheads. But this time something felt off immediately. I watched him during chow. Everyone else was spaced out, tired or caffeinated, trading one-liners about the Steelers or women. But the new guy never said a word. Never looked at the food, just stared at the wall like it was drifting away from him, like he didn't belong in his own skin. About 20 minutes into the mess, Matthews asked him something casual like, "You from the San Diego base before this?" The guy didn't even flinch, like he hadn't heard, just slowly turned his head and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile someone makes when they want you to know something's wrong but don't expect you to understand. I can still see it. Tight, strained, too many teeth. Matthews dropped it. We all did. But after that I started checking the roster every night. He wasn't on it. No last name, no billet, nothing. I memorized that sheet after 3 days. Even printed it out and kept it folded in my locker. It never changed. 127 personnel, not 128. And still the new guy kept showing up for chow or in hallways, always at off hours, always walking alone. After a week I finally asked the XO. I tried to be casual. "Hey sir, we get a new guy rotated in. Quiet dude, kind of tall, dark hair, sunken eyes. I've seen him in the corridors." He looked up from his clipboard with a blank expression and said, "Nobody sits been rotated in, no drills, no staff changes. You see someone who sits not on that roster, you come to me directly." I showed him the sheet. He didn't blink, then he sets not on board. I wish that had been the end of it. The thing is, other people started seeing him too. We weren't talking about it openly yet, but you could tell. Eye contact that lingered too long after passing the mystery man in the corridor. Guys not sleeping right. Hallway traffic rerouted. Lower compartments slowly being shut down for evaluation. And then the first incident happened. Simmons disappeared. He was on the second shift in the propulsion room. Good dude. Smart. Quiet. You'd never know he had 2 DUIs back home. His bunk was empty one morning. No one said anything until it rolled past 1800. By then the talk started. That night, someone found his ID card on Deck 7, a deck that had been locked off for maintenance since launch. Why his ID was there, no one could explain. We're not supposed to go near locked compartments unless we're ordered to. Surveillance footage was conveniently corrupted. I'd have chalked it up to Navy bureaucracy if it weren't for what came next. I was walking corridor 5H, headed toward the reactor monitoring hub. Low traffic stretch. Cold, dim, quiet. You don't usually get paranoid down there, you just try to tune out the sound of moving pressurized water and focus on your steps. But that day, I could feel something behind me. Not hear it, feel it. That sort of pressure your spine picks up right before someone reaches for your shoulder. I turned slowly, and there he was. The new guy, standing dead still 20 feet down the hallway facing me. I don't even know how I hadn't heard him come up. He didn't dare move or speak. His face did not look angry or smug. Just wrong. As if it took him effort to look human and something beneath his skin wanted out. I don't remember moving. Just the snap of lights flickering and the memory of me slamming into the hatch at the end of the corridor and scrambling into the control room like my boots were on fire. Everyone there asked what happened. I didn't tell them. None of us did. But we all started avoiding the lower decks after that. 3 nights later, Radek screamed himself awake during lights out, claimed he saw the new guy standing on the outside of his bunk curtain, not crouched or peeking in, just standing rigid inches away. Silent, eyes wrong. When he pulled the curtain open, there was no one there. But the metal floor had wet prints leading away, not from shoes. We were 900 feet deep, sealed, dry, pressurized. No one walks barefoot on steel like that. Command chalked Radek up as sleep-deprived and sedated him. But that night, I saw the same prints myself down in corridor 3F trailing toward the engine room. And the air smelled wrong there. Like rust, salt water, and something meatier underneath. Like the stench in a butcher's freezer after a week-long power outage. At this point, the crew was cracking. 2 more guys went missing. Tools misplaced. Airlocks flickered without prompt. And 2 engineers swore they heard someone whispering their names through the coolant pipes. We were over the Mariana Trench by then, officially past the mission's point of no return. Meaning if we aborted, we'd still have to complete the circuit before rescual transport. We were alone, radio silent. Cramped, heckled by something pretending to belong. I confronted the captain, cornered him in his cabin and straight up asked, "Who is the man that sips not on the manifest?" He didn't look shocked. He looked tired. All vessels past crushed depth attract something, he told me. I froze. He continued, "Every deployment like this gets an extra, never logs in, never logs out, no footsteps, no shadows, just presence. It started showing up on deep run deployments years ago, different each time. Different each time. Different face. Same feeling." He paused, then looked me dead in the eye with this hollow resignation and said, "Just don't follow it, don't speak to it. And don't under any circumstance let it block your way." After that I kept my mouth shut. I kept my eyes forward. But things only escalated. One night the lights failed for 47 seconds. The onboard clock froze. All systems black. Emergency lights wouldn't engage. And during those 47 seconds we all heard the same thing over the intercom system. Not feedback, not code. Breathing. Low, sloppy, wet like someone gasping through water in their lungs. When the power returned, 5 more people were missing. Gone. No trace. Their bunks untouched, like they'd simply gotten up and wandered off into nothing. We reached the patrol limit last week. As we ascended, the atmosphere lightened. I think we all thought maybe it couldn't follow us back up. Maybe it had to stay deep. Keep whatever game it was playing confined to the black pressure below. But a few days ago I saw the new guy one last time. Standing on the bridge. Wearing the second officer's SITS uniform. Smiling. No one's seen the second officer since the blackout. And today, just now as I typed this, someone knocked on the hull 3 times. We sit here at the surface. We stir back. But I have this gut-deep certainty that it came with us. It didn't vanish once we left deep water. It rode up like cargo. And somewhere on this sub there's still one too many people. I knew something was wrong the second we pulled up, visual confirmation on the derelict. It didn't look like it had been floating, drifting maybe, but not dead. The hull was intact, pristine even. No signs of implosion, shrapnel, or mechanical failure. Just sitting out there beneath 600 feet of black water in the North Atlantic like it had put itself to sleep. We weren't even supposed to be near it. Our patrol assignment was routine, tracking thermal currents and sonar anomalies along contested zones. But then sonar lit up like a Christmas tree with a ping that didn't make sense. No distress call, no nav beacon. Just a blank shape breaking currents where there shouldn't be anything. Command rerouted us immediately. The CO ordered a salvage inspection. No listed registry came up on any database. No NATO tags, no Russian signatures, nothing. Just an unmarked sub, old-school diesel-electric class, anchored in the deep without an anchor. We approached slowly. I was part of the first recon team. The second we breached the airlock, I gagged. The seal had clearly held, the pressure was intact, but the smell inside was wrong. Not rot exactly. More like sick metal. Hot copper, ozone, and something organic, like sour blood in a closed jar. Our suits had filters, but I swear I could still taste it. The lights inside the derelict were flickering, not dead, still running off battery backup, which meant someone or something had been moving power around. It didn't make any damn sense. We cleared corridor after corridor. Silence. We kept calling out Navy ID phrases to identify ourselves. No response through intercom. Nothing but a static hiss on every frequency. Panels blinking low. Pipes sweating with condensation. And then we reached the control room. That sips when we found the bodies. All 6 of them. Fresh. Bloated a little, but they weren't decomposing like you'd expect after days, maybe weeks, untouched in stagnant air. They looked like they'd dropped only hours ago. One guy still had his hand clutching a pen. His eyes were open, wide, mouth slack in a final breath that never quite left. No wounds. No signs of toxic inhalation. They just died, still upright in their stations. No alarms triggered. No emergency procedures active, like they accepted it or didn't even realize they were dying. What chilled me the most was their uniforms. They were ours. Not similar. Not foreign. Exactly like ours. Same patches, same name tags. One jacket even had the same unit insignia as ours, but we'd never sent another sub on this course. We were the only Navy vessel within 1,000 nautical miles of that grid line. We were ordered to secure the bridge and start power diagnostics. I took photos. Inventory. I shouldn't have, and I probably wasn't supposed to talk about what I saw next, but screw it. I need to say it. I found the crew roster. A physical log, old-style clipboard. 8 names. One of them was mine. Same last name. Same initials. Same rank. Even the handwriting looked like mine. I showed it to Diaz, our team medic. His face turned ghost white. He admitted the guy on the lower panel chair, second body left, did kinda look like me. I remember touching the guy's jacket. It was still warm. We found one more body in the aft corridor near the airlock, like someone had tried to leave. The kicker, his face looked exactly like Diaz. When we told the CO, he ordered us to tow the sub back. I begged him to scuttle it, but the command wanted it preserved, said it might have intelligence value, maybe a ghost ship captured and mimicked by enemy powers during the Cold War. Maybe it was never one of ours at all. But before we could connect the tow, we lost contact with Diaz. Not a trace. 1 minute he was in the torpedo room checking storage, the next his vitals dropped off the crew tracker and the room was empty. No ruptures. No access logs. Only one thing left behind. Diaz's helmet, upside down, sitting in the middle of the room. We called off the salvage. Everyone scrambled back to our sub. But when I boarded, the guy manning our hatch paused and gave me a funny look. He asked, "Didn't said you already come through 10 minutes ago?" I said no. I said been the last one aboard. He just frowned and looked down the hallway behind me, uneasy, like he wanted to say more. Before the hatch closed, I glanced back at the derelict one last time. Something moved behind its forward viewport. Just a silhouette, standing perfectly still, watching us go. We repressurized and began to pull away. Everyone was shaken. The CO locked down the debrief to level 4 clearance. All reports were scrubbed. Nobody was allowed to mention the duplicates we saw, the other us. But people changed after that. Small things at first. Wozniak suddenly started speaking in short, clipped phrases like he had to remember how to form each sentence. Burns developed a limp, one he hadn't had before the boarding. And 2 days later we found another helmet. This time it was mine. In my locker. Full of salt water. I didn't tell anyone. Just locked it up and sat on my bunk for hours, heart going a million miles a minute. I couldn't sleep anymore. Not really. Because at night when the lights went low and things were quiet, I'd hear something softly tapping on our hull. Not like equipment drifting. Not metal creaking. Knuckles. 3 soft knocks spaced 10 seconds apart. Like someone politely asking to be let back in. Or maybe let out. I asked the sonar if they were picking anything up. They said no. But I kept hearing it, night after night. Just me. Until yesterday. Miller, our engineer, came to my bunk. His face was pale. He asked if I ever felt like someone had been wearing me for a little too long. Not possessing me, just trying me on. Testing me. I asked what brought that on, and he just said, "I don't think I set me anymore." Then he walked down to the launch bay and vanished during shift turnover. No sign of entry, no alarms. Just gone. We're headed back to base now. Command still thinks we're bringing home a prize, some piece of forgotten Cold War hardware, but I know better. That thing we found wasn't just a sub. It was a mirror. A trap. And it's taken some of us already. Maybe not all at once, maybe not loud, but slow, quiet, patient. Swapping one of us out here, another there. So before we dock, I needed to write this. In case someone finds this log later, or in case I'm next. Because I'm starting to forget things. Faces. Birthdays. Even pieces of my own reflection don't look right anymore. And this morning I looked into the mirror above my sink just for a second, and my mouth smiled before the rest of my face did. I was ordered to stay silent about what crawled out of the torpedo tube. By the time I saw its hand, if you could even call it a hand, I knew we were way past any version of normal. The kind of normal where monsters hide in war stories and nightmares, not in flooded steel corridors 900 feet under the ocean. The kind where authority, even in the Navy, still meant something. This wasn't a case of pressure-induced hysteria or some oxygen-starved fever dream. None of that bullshit they feed you when something goes sideways and they don't want the paperwork. I saw it, clear as day. I felt the air shift around it, like the sub itself sucked in a breath the moment it appeared. I smelled it, metal and brine and something else, something sour and alive. And then I was told to say nothing. And I have. Until now. We were 17 days into a black zone mission, cutting silent across the Norwegian trench. No pings, no comms, not even a whisper back to command. Weapons hot, sonar dark, psychological pressure turned up to 11. Everyone was on edge, waiting for a reason to jump out of their skin. I was working aft security near the torpedo bay, same as usual when we got an odd update. Orders came down that we were going to be testing a non-standard delivery protocol. No real explanation, just that phrase, non-standard delivery. No one explained what was being delivered or from where. Then this guy showed up, a civilian, or pretending to be one. No patches, no name. Walked into the engine room with a classified brief and started barking new routing instructions to engineering chains like he'd been running the boat for years. That should have been my first red flag. I didn't ask questions. Should've. But you don't push back when someone walks in with clearance higher than God. So I listened, nodded, posted up outside the torpedo chamber. It was around 2300 when it started. The hallway was quiet that night. One of those silences that builds in layers, recycled air hissing too soft, metal groaning a bit too long in between creaks. You could tell the sub was holding its breath, like we all were instinctively. The torpedo bay smelled like it always does, burnt grease, cold steel, and that faint background scent of engine coolant. But there was something new lingering in the air. This plasticky, sterile smell like a hospital hallway that had been mopped too many times. Weirdest part, there was no movement. That whole section of the sub felt paused. I didn't see them come down the corridor, but suddenly there were two guys I didn't recognize standing next to me. Both in black coveralls, no insignia, no rank, pale skin, unblinking eyes, like they'd forgotten how. One of them swiped a key across the access panel. Launch tube 3 disengaged with a loud click that rolled straight down my spine. That's when I noticed the change in the interface menu. It didn't say anything about ejection. The settings were reversed. They weren't prepping to fire a torpedo, they were prepping to receive something. Let me be clear. Torp tubes don't work that way. You don't pull something in from the ocean at that depth. Pressure would kill you instantly. A fish wouldn't survive it, much less a human. But these guys didn't flinch. They just watched the panel coolly as the chamber hissed and filled with that thick, icy vapor. Then the lights in the bay dimmed, not powered down, not flickered, but dimmed, like the sub was suddenly reluctant to illuminate what was happening. A shape slapped onto the steel floor. I'm not sure how else to describe it. It made a sound like raw meat hitting cold tile. At first I thought it had to be a salvage suit. Limp, soaked, heavy with ocean. But then, it started moving. It didn't move like a person. It dragged itself out of the tube using limbs that bent the wrong way, like it hadn't always had a skeleton. Like movement itself was an experiment. I realized I was backing up without meaning to. It was pale, almost translucent, like half-peeled skin clinging to something underneath, something still growing or maybe rotting. Its body shimmered when it caught the light, like oil on water, but wrong, uneven. Then came the sound. A wet, peeling noise, like flesh being torn away from plastic. It straightened smoothly, bones crackling until it stood fully upright. Its head scraped the pipes above. It had no mask, no tanks, no gear. Just bare, glistening meat, like something newborn but already dead. One of the nameless techs stepped forward and spoke in a language that wasn't meant for air. The syllables curled, if that makes sense, like they didn't belong anywhere near a human throat. The thing turned to look at him. No whites in its eyes, just black, like staring down into the deepest part of the sea. You couldn't even tell if it saw or if it was just aware in the way a predator's aware of blood in the water. Then it turned and looked at me, and smiled. I froze. My lungs didn't work. My hands wouldn't move. Every inch of me screamed not to blink, but I blinked anyway, and it was closer. The smile, it was too wide, not just lip to lip, but pulled back across the face until it looked like it could split down the middle. Like it had tried on smile as a reference, but didn't quite understand what it meant. Even the air got heavier, thicker. The room seemed darker around it, not from lack of light, but because light didn't want to touch it. That sips when Lieutenant Marin walked in. He looked pale, exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept in days. He stood next to me, leaned in so only I could hear him, and said, "You didn't see anything clear." I whispered, "What the hell is that?" He didn't even look at the thing. He just said, "You say one word and your career is the last thing you settle lose." Then added, "It doesn't set like being talked about." And just like that, the hatch shut, and the thing was gone. I didn't eat for days. I didn't sleep either. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile, the way it knew me, not recognized. Knew. Others started cracking too. Ensign Larch, Deck 2 guy, never saw the chamber, started sleepwalking. Security found him mumbling in his sleep at the same hatch the thing had come through. He bit someone trying to bring him back to the infirmary. Then Cheng, our comm specialist, had a full-on breakdown in the surveillance hub. Said she saw a face behind the camera feeds. Claimed the more she watched, the more it watched back. Cameras started going offline all over the sub within hours. 2 days ago, Ximenez noted we were heavier than our logistic logs accounted for. Cargo unchanged. Fuel unchanged. But the sub was dragging through water like we'd taken on extra weight. Too scared to think about what we took on. When Jimenez reported it up, well, he got a visit from the black suits too. Came back with a busted lip. Said it was nothing. We stopped running drills. Stopped chasing sonar shadows. Just started circling. Waiting. Those 2 techs, the ones that reeled it in, they don't sleep with us. Don't eat with us either. I've walked past them, saw them standing guard outside a sealed hatch labeled emergency stowage. No logs on file. No crew assigned to that bay. But I hear things from behind it. Not voices, breathing. Wet, like something trying to imitate breath but not quite understanding lungs. I finally cracked and cornered the XO, asked him straight to his face, "What is that thing? Why aren't we surfacing? Why haven't we turned back?" He looked at me like he pitied me. Like he was looking at something already dead without realizing it yet. Then he said, "Because it sets awake now, and we set not allowed to leave until it says we can." That night I heard it again. A scraping sound. Like claws or bones. Shifting. Moving through the ventilation shafts, tube by tube, closer and closer. And yesterday I found it. Not it, but proof. A handprint inside the fire suppression cabinet in my quarters. Slick, wet. Mucus is still drying along the ridgelines. I haven't said a word about it. I haven't told anyone I'm writing this. They're watching everything. If I disappear, if an accident gets logged or a pressure valve fails near my station, just know I didn't break protocol. Something came on board that night. Something no one should have dragged out of the dark, and now it sits in this steel coffin with us, waiting, watching, practicing how to act human, just long enough to replace one. It started with a whisper. At first I thought it was just static, one of those harmless little glitches in mid-watch chatter that every sonar guy brushes off. Out here, at depth, you learn to live with weird echoes and signal anomalies. Pressure, salt water, old frequency ghosts. Stuff that creeps in and out like oceanic white noise. We were already 3 weeks into patrol deep under the Greenland Sea, and sleep-deprived enough to start hearing things that weren't there. At least, that's what I told myself. Until the whisper said my name. Clearly, plain as day. Raise. I flinched so hard I nearly dumped coffee on the console. Headset still snug over my ears, the sound buzzed again in the open channel. No source ID. Just random UHF bleed through line 2. Not one of our own voices. Not anyone in the sonar shack or control room. And definitely not human. "Reyes, I see you." I yanked the headphones off and stared at the others. No reaction. Romero was scribbling sonar logs, eyes glazed from pulling 2 shifts. Petty Officer Blevins was nodding off in his chair. Nobody else had heard it. I tapped my headset. "Yo, did anyone else copy that?" Romero looked up. "Copy what?" "I swear someone just called my name on channel 2. He chuckled weakly and said that channel leads to the lower engineering block. Nobody's there right now, probably just bleed. But here's the thing, channel 2 is a secure frequency. Internal access only. No way it should have been transmitting unless someone with clearance keyed in from the onboard network. Even then you don't get full names called out like that. Just rank or post code. It's always sonar 2 copy. Con sonar active track. Never "Hey Reyes, buddy," like you're getting invited out for a beer. I tried to forget it, shrugged it off. Maybe the fatigue was finally catching up. But that night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the hull, every shift of ballast sounded too loud, like something was brushing up against the sub's skin from the outside. I laid in my rack staring at the ceiling until I heard something over the general intercom that stopped my breath cold. A low whisper again, clear as before. "Come back to the radio, Reyes." I bolted up, smacked my head on the bunk above me. It was barely a whisper, but it echoed off the metal bulkhead like it had been spoken directly behind my skull. I slammed my boots on and rushed to control. Nobody else had heard it. No flag in the logs, no outbound comms, no nearby traffic. Just the subtle, maddening pulse of sonar and the deep hum of nuclear turbines pushing us God knows where. The next day, weird things started happening. The Channel 2 line began flickering open randomly during mid-watch. Multiple crew reported headphone feedback like someone quietly breathing through the line. Coughs. Subtle little clicks like teeth or nails on a microphone. Nothing commanding, just presence. Awareness. And names, not just mine. Chambers, Devlin, Peterson. People with no reason to be called. People are not even on the same shift or station. The kind of calls you ignore at first, laugh off later at chow like it's just haunted sub-jokes. But then Petty Officer Devlin was found standing motionless in the comms corridor, staring into the transmission buffer room at 0330 with his fingers twitching like he was stuck between thoughts. They found him mumbling something over and over. "It knows me. It hears every breath. It's SEP's recording us." He was medically sedated and moved to isolation. They told us it was a neurological fatigue event. Sure it was. By the time they pulled my second shift over watch, I was hearing it on an almost regular loop. The voice changed tones, sometimes whispered, sometimes more like a hiss, wet, raspy, like static through damp lungs. But the message was consistent. "Why don't you listen, Reyes? You used to listen so well." The words didn't sound threatening. They sounded familiar. That terrified me more than anything. Because they weren't mimicking someone I knew. It felt like they were mimicking me. On the 5th day, Chief Santos had a breakdown in sonar, smashed 2 consoles trying to rip the audio wiring apart, said the static was feeding thoughts through his head, said the voice was giving him coordinates. He kept repeating that phrase. "We are not intercepting it. It's intercepting us." They removed him in cuffs, hands bound, rambling as they dragged him down the corridor. Crew morale tanked after that. The XO started walking around with his sidearm out, just on his hip, casual, but not casual. The kind of move that tells everyone the chain of command wasn't feeling too safe anymore, and if something needed to be put down, it would be fast. Sleep got harder and harder. Not just for me, everyone was reporting restless nights. Nosebleeds, 3 men with spontaneous high fevers. The air systems checked clean, oxygen was regulated fine, but it felt wrong, like it was turning thin on purpose at night. And the whispers were everywhere by then, bleeding into non-radio systems, echoing in the white noise between shifts. You'd step into the galley and hear your name whispered low under the fridge's hum, or hear someone call for you behind a hatch, only to find no one was there. And through it all, the voice kept learning. Not repeating. Learning. It said things I remembered thinking a day or 2 prior, phrases I'd said in my bunk, half asleep. "She doesn't love you, Reyes. Why did you lie to her? You were scared that night in Norfolk. You wanted to run. Things no one should know. No one on board." The worst part came 2 nights ago. I was checking Channel 2 again during a diagnostic window. Just me and cold metal, and the dull feedback of open water. I asked into the mic stupidly in hindsight, "Who are you?" Just like in a damn horror movie. The response came instantly. "You." 1 word. My blood ran cold. I snapped off the headset and sat frozen for 10 minutes. I thought about reporting it. But who would I tell? Half the crew already looked like they were unraveling thread by thread. Dark circles under their eyes, lips chapped, suddenly forgetting basic navigation protocols like rookies. Nobody made eye contact in the halls anymore. The whole sub felt watched. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. Even the quiet was loud, if that makes sense. Like you were being scrutinized by something that didn't quite have eyes but understood what eyes were meant to do. Last night we hit a blackout window. Standard mid-level systems reboot. Happens all the time. But during that 30-second lull in circuits, our emergency comm system reactivated on its own. Only one voice transmitted, the same one I'd heard for days. But it didn't say my name. It said the names of the missing. Lindholm, Devlin, Chambers. And then it said one more. Reyes. I know what this sounds like. I know you'll dismiss it as isolation madness, mission fatigue, underwater acoustics, whatever helps you sleep at night. But as I write this, there's soft crackling on Channel 2 again. That same breathy whisper, repeating the same word over and over. Soon. I checked our current depth. We're descending, slow and steady, but we haven't been ordered to descend. The helm says it sets holding course. No one believes them. And I swear I just heard a second voice join him on the line. It was quieter. younger. It sounded just like me. When I woke up that morning, something was off. Everything looked the same. The red glow of the night lighting, the dull pulse of the reactor humming down the corridor, the gentle creaks of pressure at depth, all typical. But something wasn't right. I felt it before I even swung my legs off the rack. Like a missing tooth with the nerves still exposed. A hole in the memory, but worse, I remembered everything. And nobody else did. I was on the USS Clement, a fast attack sub patrolling the Norwegian Sea. It was supposed to be a normal extended recon patrol, no weapons active, no contact expected. Our orders were straightforward, tight and classified. Log sonar anomalies. Stay dark, drift and listen. But the last 3 days, 72 hours exactly, hadn't been recorded anywhere. No logbooks, no radio timestamps, nothing from sonar. Not one login signature from any of our 127-man crew, like the ship had fallen asleep and just skipped time. Except I hadn't sit. I remembered it all. The sounds we picked up on sonar, the impossible shapes moving without propulsion, the way the stars, when we briefly surfaced, looked wrong, like they'd shifted slightly left, like the whole sky had moved when no one was looking. I remembered the screams in the control room, the water level alarms blaring even though we weren't taking on any water. And I remembered Lieutenant Barron, covered in sweat, whispering, "We're not supposed to be here," over and over while trying to reroute the nav system manually. And the fog inside the goddamned sub coating the lower deck hallway, freezing cold even though we were at operating temperature. And then, nothing. Just me waking up, dry, dressed, everything buttoned up like none of it had ever happened. I thought I was going insane. Until I walked into the mess and saw everyone acting completely normal, talking about the Steelers, arguing over instant coffee, laughing, like they hadn't spent the last 3 days coming apart at the seams. I sat down next to Reese, our sonar analyst. He was chewing cereal out of a protein pouch. "Hey," I said, "what's the last thing you remember?" He didn't test blink. "Before last night, like, before lights out. Do you remember anything weird?" He raised an eyebrow. "Dude, we were on passive patrol. You slept through most of your own watch. Are you good?" I laughed nervously. "Right, but like, do you remember any low freak hull impacts? We had a weird sonar bleed, didn't we?" Now he actually looked at me, but like I was either making a shitty joke or one breath away from a psych evaluation. "Dude," he said again, lower this time, "you feeling okay? Maybe bunked too hard? You legit look like you saw a ghost." I didn't answer. I just stood up and walked out. My hands were shaking. My teeth were shaking. The more I talked to people, the more clear it became no one else had any memory of what happened during those 3 days. Not the CO, not the XO, not the fucking medic, who should have had half the sub on anti-anxiety drugs if my memories were real. But they were. I had the bruises to prove it. Small ones running along my arms and chest like I'd been restrained. 2 dark parallel lines across my right forearm, exactly the width of a restraint belt. And the kicker. My watch said it was Saturday. The system clock still said Wednesday. I confronted Lieutenant Barron that afternoon, figuring I could jog his memory. He was there. I remembered grabbing him during the chaos when the lights went red and the bulkhead behind sonar started vibrating like something was scratching from the other side. I remembered him trying to shut the power grid down manually. When I brought it up, he just blinked and said, "Petty officer, I don't know what you stir talking about. There hasn't been any power fluctuation. Maybe you stir sleep-starved. Go see sick bay." That was the last straw for me. I snuck into the comms room that night during shift change, pulled up the encrypted black box logs. I'd been trained as a secondary tech, so I knew how to get around the automation. There were missing logs, not blank. Scrubbed. The timestamps were there, but the content was absent. It wasn't a glitch. It had been redacted intentionally, and I didn't have anywhere near the clearance to see who did it. but in one of the backup drives tucked away in a forgotten maintenance cache there was a single audio file, 13 seconds long. I can still hear it in my head. The first part was static, low, like wind under heavy fabric. Then, a voice, not talking, just breathing, right into the mic. Then it whispered, "Don't sit, remember. Don't sit, remember. Reyes is awake." I recoiled so fast I slammed my elbow into the terminal. It tripped a fail-safe alert and I had to bolt before someone caught me, but not before I burned the file onto my own encrypted audio stick. The next day it was gone. Wiped from my stick, overwritten. The file label had been changed to an equipment calibration test. But I know what I heard. Now people are acting strange around me. Reese doesn't sit with me anymore. Baron gives me this tight, forced smile whenever we pass each other like I'm radioactive, and I swear on my mother. 2 of the warrant officers followed me into the lower access corridor this morning. They left when I doubled back. We've started descending again. I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but I ran the depth logs last night. We moved another 400 feet down during a period where we were supposed to be static. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody questions it. I asked the helm guy just to be sure, and he said, "We've been holding depth for 12 hours, plain as day, but the cabin pressure says otherwise. My sinuses feel like they're bleeding every time I swallow. No birds this far down, no weather systems. We're below sonar depth mapping now, sub-baseline, where light never touches, and even the Navy doesn't have names for what's down there. One of the crew, Ensign McAllister, was quietly discharged yesterday. Just like that, medevaced. Supposedly a family emergency. I've seen Navy medevacs. They're noisy, shadowy. This was silent. A dry transfer logged with only 3 lines of code. He'd been covering sonar during that lost time. I tried bringing all this to the captain 2 hours ago. He looked at me across his desk expressionless, and then calmly said, "There's nothing down here that we weren't told to find." Then added, "I suggest you start forgetting the things you think you remember, petty officer, before this ship takes that weight off for you." I don't know what he meant by that, but the lights have been flickering again. The walls feel closer than before, like the whole ship is exhaling something it can't hold. The crew's quieter by the hour. People I've known since boot camp won't return small talk anymore. It's like I'm the anomaly, not them. Something happened during those 3 days. I don't know what. I don't even know if knowing it would help. But something got in through us and wiped its tracks clean. No one remembers. No one is allowed to remember. Except me. And last night when I caught my reflection in the control panel just for a second, it blinked before I did. We weren't supposed to go that deep. That's the first thing they drilled into us back at Groton. You hit maximum safe depth and you stay there. You don't dive lower. Not unless you're trying to crush the hull, kill your crew and end up a footnote in some accident report that'll be buried under bureaucratic red tape for the next 20 years. But that's exactly what we did. And I'm telling this now before it catches up to me because I need anyone to understand what we saw, what we woke up. It started on day 16 of our patrol run, USS Chimera fast attack submarine. No major operations, just recon near the Arctic plate shelf, quiet, cold, barely any chatter on sonar aside from the occasional sperm whale or thermocline bounce back. Then we got redirected. No warning, just a cold-sounding encrypted message sent directly to the captain's terminal. He wouldn't tell us what it said. Wouldn't even acknowledge a command change. He just entered new course coordinates and ordered us into a silent running posture. We changed, heading toward a location that didn't exist on any of our maps. We weren't briefed, weren't told anything. We just dove. Down past where the knuckle draggers and the bridge crew start getting nervous. Past the safe operating range. Past the crush threshold. I was on sonar when it really started to get strange. The water down there was dead silent. No whale calls, no current ripples. I tried to run active pings just once to confirm depth. The usual feedback came back oddly, muted, like the ocean didn't want to echo. Then I saw something on the sonar screen that froze me cold. At first I thought it was a data bug, a shape big, stationary, sitting at 10,000 meters. No movement, no heat signature, too symmetrical to be rock formation, too massive to be wreckage. I pinged again, same result. The shape didn't move, it just was there, wrong, like it wasn't in the water, it was the water. Like the sonar outline was less of an object and more of a shadow drawn in the space between things. I called it in. The captain looked over my shoulder, said nothing, then flipped the override and killed the sonar feed. Full lockdown. Data corruption, he called it. But we didn't change course. We dove deeper. The boat began to strain. At first it was subtle creaks and groans and hydraulic hisses. You can tune that out, but then the walls started to breathe. I don't mean that metaphorically. The bulkheads sighed. I remember one night lying in my rack, the whole room flexed inward for a split second, like the pressure outside had suddenly multiplied and then let go. Several crew heard it. We all looked at each other like, did that really happen? Nobody said anything out loud after that. But the fear was setting in. People started having nosebleeds, eyes bloodshot. Then came the dreams. I thought it was just me until I saw Jenkins, our forward torpedo operator, writing symbols on the fog mirror in the head. I caught him early in the morning. He didn't even notice me at first, just kept writing the same curling circular shape with his finger, repeating, arms shaking like he was freezing. I asked him what he was doing. He looked straight through me and said, "It sets calling. It sets louder every night." Then he vomited. Clear liquid. No food, no blood, just water. He was transferred to the sealed med bay an hour later. The symbols began to appear everywhere, drawn into the thin layer of condensation on pipes, etched into stray notepads. I swear I saw one burned into the paneling near the aft ballast controls, like etched with heat, but no disturbance around it, no markings on camera footage. Still, we continued to descend. The lower we went, the harder it was to breathe, even with air recirc running 100%. The light grew dimmer, not just ship lighting but ambient light itself. I began to feel like something was pressing against the sub, enclosing it, hugging it like a fist. On what should have been day 23, we bottomed out. At least that's what I think happened. We never hit bottom per se, but everything vibrated once, a single booming pulse through the hull, and then stopped. It felt like hitting a soft wall bigger than the earth. Nobody moved for a full minute, waiting for the tearing sound of steel, the rush of cold killing water. It never came. Instead, we just floated. Even the reactor felt quieter. Then we got visual. The external camera feed blinked back on. The screen was dim, blurry, either due to pressure or interference, but there was something out there. A structure. Not man-made. Not even alien in the sci-fi sense. Older than both. Carved into the earth beneath the trench like it had grown from it. And it was pulsing, just faintly. A slow, cyclical rhythm. Not biological, but alive all the same. I watched the screen in silence, aware that there were at least 6 of us huddled around the terminal, no one breathing. Then the camera went black. The captain came over the PA, his voice emotionless. All hands returned to quarters. Observation classified. No one moved. He repeated the order. This time there was an edge to his voice. We scattered. That night the entire ship shook. Nothing external. The instruments read calm. But the inside, the metal, the wiring, us, we all trembled like someone had screamed directly into our spines. People started disappearing after that. Not killed. Not dragged off. Just gone. Their bunks are still made. uniforms untouched. No door logs, no access pings, just names erased by silence. By then, we weren't manned enough to rotate full shifts. The sub was running itself. Autopilot functions, not event-triggered, just happening. Water treatment, navigation, even engine modulation chugging along without input, and still we weren't rising. If anything, we were drifting even farther down. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. Not a voice, a presence. Like someone whispering in a frequency my brain wasn't designed to receive properly, but meaning pushed through anyway. Alien, vast, wrapping around the soul like a cold hand and saying, "Remember me." I think those who vanished were the ones who understood it and followed. Maybe they opened the hatch. Maybe they just faded from this dimension into whatever dark thing waited outside. Me, I stayed, because I refused to understand, refused to listen. But last night I caught myself whispering in my sleep. No words, no language, just rhythm, repeating. I recorded it on my headset, played it back this morning. It's the same vibration we felt when we hit whatever that wall was. Not an impact, a heartbeat. We didn't find an anomaly. We found a body, a sleeping thing, or a dying one. And now we're inside of it, trapped in its slow, impossible death, learning its language, inhaling its breath. It used the trench like an eyelid, and our sub opened it. This morning I woke up and found every panel wide open. No alarm, no breach. Just the ocean waiting patiently outside the hull, silent, watching, smiling. Because now it knows we see it, and it can finally see us back. I knew something wasn't right the moment the lights flickered. We'd been under the ice shelf for a week, running silent in the Beaufort Sea, no pings, no signals, no external comms, just the constant hum of the USS Harbinger and the pressure of 1,000 feet of frozen ocean above us. No easy surface escape. No sun, no stars, just ice and steel and darkness. The books say isolation gets to you after a while, but this wasn't incest isolation. This was something else. The official story was research seismic mapping under an unstable Arctic shelf. Our real mission, classified. As usual, the Navy doesn't send a nuke-capable attack sub to poke around for science. All we knew was that we were mapping something large and unmapped. Something deep. I was on reactor watch the night it happened. Boring as hell usually. A dozen readings blinking in the soft green glow of the monitors and the quiet hiss of recycled air filling your lungs. But around 0200 hours everything started dropping. Power flickered down just a second or two. Instrument lights dimmed, red emergency kits blinked on and off based on battery activation. But then it didn't come back. Total blackout. No electronics. No sounds. Just cold. The worst kind of cold. The kind that creeps up, bone deep, not immediate, not painful. Empty. Like the oxygen wasn't working quite right. Like the air had lost all warmth. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Something was wrong beyond a technical failure. This blackout felt intentional. At first I thought maybe a system surge or backup failure. I went to key my radio dead. Tried to manually power up the reactor console. No response. Gravity stabilizers held, but barely. I could feel the floor tilt just slightly. The kind of minor displacement you only really notice below crush depth. Then I heard it. The tap, tap, tap. Not from the hull, from inside the compartment. Soft, almost gentle. Like someone knocking on a desk to get your attention. 3 taps. A pause. Then again. 3 taps. Closer. I was alone. No one else had been pulled for duty that shift. When I called out just barely. "Hello?" I swear I heard a reply. Not a word. A breath, drawn and slow, like someone inhaling through their teeth. And still darkness, not even the glow of the reactor core. A full, unnatural black that felt like it pressed inward. I fumbled my flashlight from my locker, hit the switch, and there was someone standing in the corridor outside the compartment door, just beyond the glass. No uniform, no ID, just a silhouette, arms limp at their sides, their head tilted upward slightly, like they were staring into the ceiling, like they had no awareness of me. But the worst part, they were too still. Not like standing still, like frozen, locked in place. And when I brought the beam of the flashlight onto the glass, they weren't casting a shadow. I blinked. Gone. Nothing there. Just corridor and condensation and my own pulse thudding behind my teeth. I should have called it in, banged on the nearest alarm and signaled to the bridge crew. But the ship was still dead, and I was too shaken to risk wandering past where I'd seen it. I stayed there until emergency systems finally kicked back on 33 full minutes later. Battery floodlights, partial nav recovery. The radio buzzed again. I didn't wait, hauled ass to control. Found Lieutenant Jameson pacing in front of sonar, pale and breathless. When I asked what the hell had happened, he shook his head and just said, "We lost everything for 30. Then he said the part that gave me goosebumps I still can shake. "We're not where we were before it went dark." I stared at the map overlay. Coordinates had shifted by about 7 clicks. That might not sound like much to anyone topside, but when you're under a continent of ice with no propulsion and no sonar, 7 clicks is a goddamn ghost jump. The sub had moved with no working engines. Logically impossible. Only explanation: external force. And then Baker, lowest guy on the totem, sonar tech barely out of school, pipes up with, "I think something dragged us." The room went silent. No one laughed. He said he'd been messing with the backup directional sonar during the blackout, running passive bounces off the surrounding ice, and he picked up vibrations. Like tendrils. Not random, deliberate. Wrapping around the hull. He described it as being reeled in, slowly, like a fishing line drawing something up from the dark. Command dismissed it, said sonar anomalies were common under ice, that we'd experienced compression drift or magnetics interference. But Baker, he transferred to galley duty by the next day. I wouldn't go near sonar again. The weirdest part came 48 hours later. All the internal security cameras from the blackout, especially those near the lower stern, the ones not connected to critical systems, had self-wiped. That shouldn't be possible. Internal cam logs aren't tied into propulsion or core power. They're independent. And worse? Before they were wiped, the backup server flagged movement in the torpedo room. I saw the alert myself. Non-scheduled access. No logged ID. By the time I checked the terminal, footage folder corrupted. Around this time the mood shifted. The crew stopped sleeping right away. Guys I'd known for years walked the halls like strangers, wide-eyed, twitchy, like they were listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear. Petty Officer Langley tried to stab his bunkmate during lights out, said he thought someone else was inside him. Not beside him, inside. He was restrained. And when medical went to sedate him, he bit off his own tongue and whispered something none of us could understand. Not another language, just wrong, like it wasn't built for human mouths. 2 more petty officers disappeared on patrol just 3 days later. No traces, no alarms. One of them was last seen walking toward aft storage 3 hours after that section had been locked for systems checks. We reviewed camera logs. There was nothing. Except right before the feed cut, he turned to the lens, didn't wave, didn't smile, just stared, expressionless, and then slowly tilted his head up, as if he was listening to something above the sub, above the crushed depth, above the ice. I think that's what froze me, because not even light touches above us out there. Only water, then ice, then whatever sits on the other side. No one's been able to explain the movement during the blackout. No one mentions the reshuffled coordinates anymore. Every time I even ask about the torpedo room, someone from command checks in on me later. Today I found something that broke me. Inside one of the maintenance lockers, locker 071A, 4 decks down, I found a patch of frost on the interior door. Perfect handprint, human-sized, but backward. Fingers facing out as if the hand had come from inside the steel. And I swear to God, it was still wet. The lights flickered again an hour ago. Only for a moment, but long enough for the forward cameras to drop their feeds once more. And just before they did, I watched the live feed. Something was standing at the very front of the ship, atop the polar dome, on the ice, looking down at us like it had been waiting a long, long time. It was smiling, and its face, it was my own.